One of the ways we're going to solve quadratic equations is using a method called extracting square roots. And here's the example. Look at the example above. 2x minus 1 quantity squared equals 9. We can really take the square root of both sides, or we can think this way. What number squared? So there's some number squared equals 9. And I think you obviously see that 3 is, but we also must realize that a negative 3 is also, a negative 3 squared is also 9. So when we take the square root of both sides, so to speak, we have to realize that there are two possibilities here. So we can have 2x minus 1, realize that those squares go, the square and the square root goes away, and then I got the square root of 9. So 2x minus 1 can equal, I'm going to say plus or minus 3, which really means two equations. 2x minus 1 equals 3, or 2x minus 1 equals a negative 3. And now I can solve those equations. Add 1 to both sides, 2x equals 4, divide by 2, x equals 2, or 2x equals a negative 2, and divide by 2, I get negative 1. And if you punch negative 1 and 2 back into this original equation, you should be able to convince yourself that both of those numbers work. So there's two answers, or two zeros. Right. One more example. Sometimes they're not going to be given to you, very straightforward. Remember, we didn't have a number here. We did not have a number in front, so we want to get rid of that before we start extracting square roots. So I can simply divide both sides by 2. So I'm left with x minus 5 squared equals 7 halves. Then when I take the square root of both sides, so to speak, I get x minus 5, and now I have to realize there are two numbers that can be squared to come up with 7 over 2, and that's the square root of 7 over 2 plus or minus. Now 7 over 2 square root, I don't know that off the top of my head, so I'm just going to leave it in that form. So I realize I have two equations. X minus 5 equals positive square root of 7 over 2, and x minus 5 equals a negative square root of 7 over 2. Solve both equations, so you have an or situation here. Solve both equations. X equals 5, so add 5 to both sides, plus, and I'm going to leave the square root of 7 over 2, and some of you may be troubled by that because that's obviously a radical 2 in the denominator, but we're not going to worry about rationalizing right now, although we can if we're asked. Or x equals, add 5 to both sides, 5 minus square root of 7 over 2. And once again, we've got a rational number and an irrational number. We cannot combine those. We can punch them in our calculator and get an estimate. But that's what we're going to be left with. Just leave your answer in that way.